If you love hearing behind-the-scenes business stories from inspiring content creators, this podcast is just for you. My name's Sam Barcroft, and I'm one of the pioneers of original documentaries on YouTube. Back in 2003, I started a company called Barcroft Studios from my bedroom in Tottenham, London. 16 years, 2,000 videos, dozens of TV shows, and 70 million followers later, I sold my company, I bought a farm, and settled in for my happy ever after. And now I've founded Creativille to help other media entrepreneurs to reach their ultimate goals. As I grow Creativille and reflect on the mad highs and lows of Barcroft Studios, I'm on a mission to learn from the very best in the business. In every episode, I meet a super producer and ask them to reveal the 3 biggest decisions they've made on their quest for success. So join me as I find out their biggest business secrets and stick around at the end for my top takeaway from today's very special guest. Welcome to the Big Swing. In 2014, Major Levison Wood became the first ever person to walk the length of the River Nile. He told the story of his expedition in a best-selling book, and the film of his journey became a smash-hit documentary series for Channel 4. Since then, Lev has starred in 8 TV series and written 10 books documenting his incredibly dangerous expeditions around the world. In fact, the Times of London now hails him as Britain's best-loved explorer. But what's less well known is the story of Lev's entrepreneurial career. For me, Levison is first and foremost a swashbuckling storyteller, driven by a deep desire to share tales of his amazing adventures. We first met over a decade ago, when Lev was a complete unknown. But even then, his focus, determination and resilience were plain to see, and I can't say I'm surprised how successful Lev's become. So, what entrepreneurial lessons can Levison's story have for the rest of us? Well, it turns out that Lev started his adventures very early on in life.
I think I was about 10. My dad took me to an art exhibition by a guy called David Shepherd. I don't know if you've come across, but
Yes, remarkable kind of landscape and
landscape, wildlife, and I remember as a sort of 10-year-old thinking, wow, this guy gets to travel around Africa painting elephants. That's what I want to do. I want to go and see the world. And so I sort of asked him how to do it, and he said, well, you've just got to work hard, and it doesn't matter how bad you are at something. And he showed me some of his early pictures and I remember thinking at age 10, seeing his first sketches of an elephant, I thought, that's really crap. I could do better than that.
So you wanted to take him on as an elephant artist?
I think the point he was trying to make was like, just stick at it, and that was a very valuable lesson, because actually in later life, 2 years ago, in fact, I went to, just after he'd passed away, there was a charity auction in his honor, and they actually sold off all of his early pictures, and
wow.
Needless to say, I bid for that elephant that I'd seen when I was 10 years old and bought it. And it's on my wall. The seed was set, and so I made my plan, and that was it. I wanted to be an explorer.
You'd already figured out one of the biggest rules of entrepreneurship, which is that everybody sucks at everything to start off with.
Totally.
Well, it's a really important lesson, isn't it? Because I think as an entrepreneur, most people only become entrepreneurs because they're willing to keep going while they're rubbish, because others try things, realize they're difficult, and pull out immediately.
I think, you're right, because a lot of people give up too soon. And I think that you've got to have some hard knocks in life early on to teach you that value of determination and resilience. I can credit that entirely to my dad and to my granddad, actually. Granddad worked down the mines and in factories, and he was a soldier in Burma in the Second World War. And I remember thinking, bloody hell, he's had a proper life. He's had a hard life. I've got nothing to complain about. I need to go put myself in hard, tricky situations to be able to measure myself as a man. And I remember thinking this at age 10, and I felt totally inadequate, because I realized that I would never have those challenges ahead of me.
Wow. And
so I actively sought those challenges as a kid. And that sort of made me a bit of a rebel and got me into all sorts of trouble. And as a teenager, because I sort of went out looking for trouble, and I certainly found it.
So already, as a young kid, Levison knew what he wanted to be. He had a clear goal. Not only that, but he knew that it would take him some time and toughness to achieve his goal. Having an objective and a sense of what you need to do is a massive advantage, because it means you can make a plan and put it into action. So Levison joined the army.
And perhaps it's not much of a surprise that after only 4 years, his first big swing was to turn his back on the security of a military career for the unknown.
Up until then, every bit of my energy and focus had been on getting in the army, serving in the army, and I was in charge of a platoon of 30 men and, fighting on the battlefields of Afghanistan. And I really had to dig deep to have the courage to leave, because it would have been all too easy to just stay and see that as a career. But I knew something deep down sort of said, no, you stick to your guns, go back to that boyhood dream, go and be an explorer. It sounds ridiculous to say. I was a 28-year-old paratrooper, and something inside me was saying, go and follow a boyhood dream that I'd had 15 years or 20 years before.
You talked about having to push yourself to get out of the army. What were the stakes? Why was it such a tough decision? What were the good bits that you were leaving behind potentially?
I think a lot of it was just how much I'd invested in it. I felt like I'd worked so hard to get there and I'd achieved what I wanted. I was a captain in the paras, living my best life. A lot of people were like, right, they get married or at least have a partner. I'm talking about in the army here. Then they're sort of, the pressure's on to go and get a high paid job in the city. And that's what a lot of ex-army guys do, is go and work in finance. Mm-hmm. And then go and unload a cash and then move to Surrey. And that's fine. That's just not what I personally wanted to do. So the risk really for me was like just busting out, not knowing which direction I was going to go and hoping for the best.
Did anyone jump in and kind of try and dissuade you?
Everybody jumped in, even my parents. My parents were like, what are you doing? You've got a great job. There's a recession on. This is 2009. The economy was in a crap state. And everybody, including my boss in the army, was like, you're never going to get a job out there. Why don't you just stay in? It's much easier. You get free clothes, And I was like, no, this is all the more reason to leave, because I kind of like the chaos. I embraced that uncertainty, but it was still a terrifying thing. Yeah. So I did. I ended up literally taking my maroon beret, that hallowed thing that I'd worked so hard to do, and I literally took 2 scraps of paper. One said stay and one said leave. Put them in my beret, picked one out, and I got the one that said leave. I think if I'd got the one that said stay, I would have just kept taking them out until I got the one that said leave. But because it came out with leave, there was such a rush of relief. I knew I'd made that right decision. And so I left.
Of course, leaving the army and taking that leap into the unknown was a massive risk for Levison. And all of us entrepreneurs have to get used to living with big risks. I'm not sure whether Lev thought he was an entrepreneur just yet, but taking those big decisions and putting yourself out there can really force the situation. And it can feel like the hardest part of the entrepreneurial journey, especially when everyone thinks you're wrong.
The big swing moment for me came when the realization almost that it's all well and good having these great ideas, but really following through and making them work is an entirely different matter, because I had no cash. I had a couple of grand from the army. Most of, probably boozed most of it up the wall like you do in the army, but I had no money. So I had to go and start earning some money. And this was a big change for me, because up until then, I just got, my money had turned up in the bank every month, and that was that. So to have to go and earn it creatively as a freelancer was mind blowing. I was like, I didn't know what tax was. I didn't know what doing your annual returns. I didn't even know what an accountant was, really. I was so naive in all these different ways financially. And I hadn't read any books on how to be an entrepreneur. So I was kind of just making up as I went along.
So there's a key point in here. Sure, being an entrepreneur is fundamentally about setting up and running a business. But even more important than that is the ability to monetize those skills and passions, whatever they may be. And because Lev wanted to be an explorer, he'd joined the army to learn how to survive in risky places. And now, with a business partner, he'd set up Secret Compass, a travel company offering adrenaline junkies the ultimate holidays to awesome, dangerous lands.
It was a bit of a risk, thinking people would want to go to war zones, but it turns out they did. And we, before we knew it, we were organizing incredible trips, skiing in Iraq, believe it or not, horse riding in Afghanistan, whitewater rafting in Sudan, and they sold out.
It was a necessity that kind of turned you into an entrepreneur then, is that fair to say?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily your dream to be out there becoming somebody who ran a company. It was your dream was to be an explorer, right?
The sort of commercial element was not really part of my dream, but I realized it was an essential ingredient in, one, surviving, but two, learning about the big wide world. At this stage, I was 28, 29, 30. So for 3 years, I was essentially homeless, right? And when I say homeless, I wasn't sort of, sitting in sort of doorways, but I had nowhere to live at all.
Wow.
So I basically spent 3 years bouncing around friends' sofas. And I had a rule of thumb that I wouldn't stay with anyone more than 3 nights. And this is something I'd learned from Gurdwaras in India with the Sikhs. And I'd spent a bit of time in India on my travels. And the rule of thumb there is, you're welcome for 3 days and 3 nights. And then after that, bugger off.
That's a brilliant one. I'm going to use that at home.
I kept true to it because otherwise, you end up pissing your mates' wives off and then you're not welcome again. So I stuck to this and I sort of went on a bit of a rotation. But I have to say there were moments where I'd done my loop and I'd run out of friends, and there were moments I slept on benches in Clapham Common multiple times, and because I didn't want to outstay my welcome. And so, I'd go away on these expeditions for a fortnight, come back to London, stay as long as I could until I completely ran out of money and friends, and then I'd go away on expedition. And this lasted for 3 years. But, I look back and think, bloody, that was mad. But actually, it was taking those risks. And actually, I didn't have any money to spend anyway, because whatever little money I did have, I'd invested in things like a camera and the fledgling business Secret Compass. And that didn't make any money for at least 2 years. So I didn't take a paycheck for until I was 30, about 30 years old.
What's remarkable about it is, your kind of stickability, I suppose. The fact that you'd started this company, you'd identified an opportunity in the market to offer trips that nobody else was mad enough or bad enough to lead, to take people somewhere that they could come back and wear as a badge of honor, I suppose. Oh, I've just been to Sicily for 2 weeks. Well, I've just been whitewater rafting in the Sudan. It's a pretty cool thing to be able to say, isn't it? And it feels like you're living your adventure, right? Because you're willing to sleep on the streets to kind of keep that expedition going and on the road. I can't believe you were running a business whilst you were sleeping on benches in Clapham Common. That's like remarkable. At some stage, did you not sit there and just think, I didn't realise it was going to be this tough?
All the time. There were plenty of times I thought, is this really what I saw my mates who'd gone to work in banks earning 10 times what they're earning in the army, and I was sleeping on benches in Clapham Common. But no, there was something, it had integrity about it, and I knew that I had to go through this phase, and maybe I was delusional, but I just somehow knew that it was just a phase that I'd have to get through, and if you stick at something long enough, then you have to trust the process and trust that the universe will provide. And I had that faith. I don't know where it came from, but I had that faith that it would all come good.
Were you not worried when you were taking people off on these trips to Iraq, Afghanistan, that, something would go wrong and you'd end up, being responsible for rescuing a very difficult situation?
Yeah, well, I did once. We'd taken a bunch of guys to Iraq to go and climb Iraq's highest mountain in the middle of winter. And this mountain had only ever been climbed once before. And I thought, well, we need at least somebody who's been there. So I managed to track down this bloke who'd been on that first expedition. And so he turned up and he's like, yeah, well, the last time I was here, I was given this business card. I don't know who it's from, but this is our get out of jail card in case anything goes wrong. I was like, okay, good to know. Off we go. So we started on our trip, and we basically it was right on the Iranian border. So it's quite a sensitive area.
Right.
And we saw this village, and we pitched our tents, and within 10 minutes, a load of police cars had arrived. And they were like, who are you? You're all under arrest. So I had to go back to these clients and explain how the kind policeman had offered us a free stay for the night. And these clients, all of whom had paid quite a bit of cash to be there, were like, what? This is a bit strange. And literally, they all got their own cell for the night. A cell. Anyway, I remembered we'd been given this card, literally a get out of jail card. I thought, well, if ever there was a time to ring an unknown number, now it's now. So I rang this number, but it was already like midnight at this stage. And I just passed the phone to the chief of police. And I'll never forget, his face just went white. And he sort of started nodding and mumbling, put the phone down, and his whole demeanour changed. He ordered everyone kebabs, made everyone a cup of tea. He said, oh, don't worry, everything's fine. Can I get you anything? Anyway, an hour later, a whole fleet of these brand new Toyota Land Cruisers turned up. We got whisked in this convoy to what can only be described as a sort of James Bond villain lair, which was like this castle on top of a mountain in the middle of Kurdistan. Anyway, we were welcomed by this very shady looking chap in a leather jacket with a pistol down his jeans, who gave us a big hug, said welcome, welcome, gave us all a bed for the night. And then it wasn't until the next morning, when there's a whole feast laid on, that we realised that this was the president's brother.
Oh my God. No way.
And then he packed us on our merry way. He gave us a guide, he gave us a car, and said we can go over and climb the mountain. So all's well that ends well.
So, Levison wanted to be an explorer and to share the stories of his exploits with the world. Secret Compass, his travel company, had become successful, and Lev was travelling the world having extraordinary experiences. But Lev figured out this wasn't actually what he wanted. So, it was time for his second big swing, to turn his back on the company he'd founded and become a full-time explorer.
I thought, right, I've got to go and do something that's going to blow people's socks off and potentially blow my socks off. So I kind of made a short list of journeys, figuring out what hadn't been done before, of which walking the Nile was it. And when I took it to Channel 5, they turned it down. It then went to Channel 4. And then I played the double bluff, as you often have to in when you're a young entrepreneur. I was approaching a publisher and told them I got a TV deal. I didn't. And I told the TV people I'd got a book deal. I hadn't. And then it was because both of them were like, "Oh, really? This must be happening. This must be big." And then they both gave me a deal, and that really sort of a bit of a risk, but that paid off because I ended up with a TV deal and a book deal, which blew my mind because I'd suddenly gone from sleeping on park benches to being offered six-figure sums to go and do my dream trip, which I couldn't believe my luck, really. And I think that confidence breeds success, in that people don't want to be held responsible for your success, so they'd rather just not shoulder it in the first place. Whereas if you take that burden away and say, look, I'm doing this, you're either on board or you're not, I don't care. People are far more likely to support you in your endeavours, I've found.
Yeah, I found that in my entrepreneurial career. That's actually what convinces people to back breakthrough talent. It's not the idea that they should just spread bet on lots of different things that are happening.
Yeah.
It's the one that they worry that they're going to get fired for not having taken the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So what was really interesting to me, though, the jeopardy around that big swing of actually going and walking the Nile. How did you feel at that stage about kind of coming out from behind the company of Secret Compass and into being Levison Wood, the explorer, the public personality? Was that in your mind at the time, that the jeopardy of losing your privacy and kind of putting yourself out there?
I remember the director that worked with me on that. He said, look, you do realize your life's going to change forever? And I hadn't even considered it. I was like, well, whatever. I'll do a few radio interviews and that'll be it. I certainly wasn't prepared for quite how it was going to change my sort of life. In my mind, I'd sort of do my big trip. I'd write my book. The TV was a nice to have. It was a sort of I understood the benefits of having that platform. It would sell books. It would give me a profile from which to cement my name, I suppose. But that was it. I then thought I'd hang up my walking boots and retire to Surrey. I never once thought that I'd still be able to be doing this, every year for a decade almost later. I wasn't prepared for the stakes, I suppose, of because everything changed. Because of the Nile, I ended up having to sell my share in Secret Compass because, one, I just wasn't around enough to commit to that. But two, you have to go all in. You can't have a safety blanket. There was no backup plans. There was nothing. You can't suddenly decide, oh, actually, I want a mortgage. Every single penny I had went into that journey.
So being an entrepreneur isn't just about taking financial risks. For Levison, and I think for all entrepreneurs I know, there are big personal consequences too.
Me and my former business partner, we had a bit of a row about it because we just had, at that stage, we had a bit of a different vision. And so I thought, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to walk away, take the business. That's it. So, it was all hinged on the success of this one thing, and it paid off. But it wasn't without its sacrifices. I had a girlfriend for donkey's years that sort of fell by the side. And when you go away for such a long period, I mean, the walking the Nile was 9 months, but then all the other subsequent expeditions have been 6 months, 8 months, whatever. So you stop getting invited to weddings, you stop getting invited to birthdays, people sort of forget you're around. And so it can be quite an isolating experience, even more so when you become successful, because on the one hand, everyone suddenly wants to jump on the bandwagon, and people that didn't support you in the first instance are like, oh yeah, I was there all along, and we supported you all the way. And like, well, you kind of didn't, but that's okay. You don't expect people to support you, but actually, there's a lot of people out there that don't really want you to be successful, even sometimes your own friends, because it sort of perhaps highlights some of their own perhaps lack of commitment. It might be the case, and that can be quite difficult, having some quite difficult conversations. So there's a lot of things you have to accept, I suppose, when you've thrown all your eggs in one basket, and whether it's successful or not, it does raise a lot of quite dark spectres that sort of surround it. So it wasn't just as simple as like, right, rest on your laurels now. I just entered a whole new world where suddenly I was the focus of it all, and the sort of center of this brand. And when you become a brand, it's quite a hard pill to swallow, because you're your own commodity, which is a very weird thing to have to deal with.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Because I doubt you would have been able to, when you were objectively taking that decision, do I go and walk the Nile or not? I'd imagine your thoughts were pretty practical.
Yeah, you're not thinking about any of these
visas?
things. Yeah, you're just like, I'm going to go on a great trip. It's only all that other stuff comes later.
Yeah, and I suppose having been 100% in on it, you had it was kind of a forcing mechanism, right? You're in, you're 100% in. So
There's no choice.
These challenges start raising. It's a bit like being halfway up a mountain. You're committed to the mountain. You have to keep going, right?
Yeah.
So did that feel at any stage like you wanted to jump back out of it? That you were kind of thinking about, how do I now get myself back into something that's less high profile, less risky?
When I was on the trip, I didn't even let those thoughts enter my mind, because I knew the moment you start having doubts, that's when you run the risk of failure. So not really. I just got on with it, did it, and then hoped that it would be as good as it could be, and it was. And it ended up being the highest rated show on Channel 4 that year, and then suddenly everything changed. And then before the year was out, I'd already had them asking me what the next thing was, and so I had carte blanche. I said, right, I'm going to go and walk the Himalayas. And they're like, great, off we go next year. Summer's booked. And then the next year and the next year, and I'm sort of eight sort of series in now, and 10 books later. It sort of blows my mind when I sort of look back on it. The opportunities that have come about from that, have been amazing, and I feel so lucky that I've been able to follow through on that boyhood dream, really.
So by now, you might have guessed Levison's third and final big swing. Yet, like the adventurer he is, Lev stuck to his guns and walked away from his dream TV golden handcuffs deal to follow his passion. And in 2017, Levison Wood set up his very own television production company, Blackmane Media.
Well, so Blackmane Media really came about really as an act of petulance. I've been very lucky. I'd done all these trips with Channel 4 and done loads of really good stuff. But there was one trip that I really, really wanted to do, which was a journey around the Arabian Peninsula. But it's a region that's mired and steeped in such controversy. Nobody had the balls to do anything other than standard news reporting. And I thought it was very sad, because we only ever hear about the negativity in the Middle East. And I knew, having spent a lot of time there, that there's so much more to it than that. So I pitched this idea, and everyone said no. They said, it's too dangerous. Nobody wants to watch it. It's full of bad guys. It's full of terrorists. And I pitched it far and wide. I ended up getting the sack from Channel 4 for this. I was on an exclusivity agreement, and they were like, we'll back it, but you're not allowed to go to Iraq. You can't go to Syria. You can't go to Yemen. You can't go to Lebanon, and you can't go to Israel, Palestine. I was like, well, where's left?
You go to Dubai, to the airport.
So I said, you know what? I'm going to go and do it anyway. And they said, if you do that, we're going to sack you and we'll stop your exclusivity arrangement. I said, okay, do it. So I ended up basically speaking to a good mate of mine from the army, Dave, and another buddy, Simon, who had been a sort of photographer on some of my expeditions before. So I said, look, lads, let's all chip in and then make something ourselves away from the constraints of organised television, and we'll make the best ever documentary, and then we'll sell it afterwards. And they were like, well, I think you're mad, but all right. So we all bunged in quite a lot of money. As you know, making TV is not cheap.
No.
It was literally my entire sort of savings pretty much to date, and it was certainly their entire savings to date. And we basically got our crew, and we did it was like literally 4 of us. Off we went. We went and did this film, went through Syria. We were on the front lines fighting against ISIS. We went in Yemen. And actually we got back in one piece, and we ended up selling it. Certainly didn't make any profit, but it just paid for itself. We sold it to Discovery Channel, and I think to this date, it's the best film I've ever made. It ended up being shortlisted for loads of awards, and I ended up getting a very nice, discreet email from this bloke at Channel 4 saying, I'm really sorry, we missed out there. You did a great job. So there was sort of vindication in that. But that's how I set up Black Main Media. It was like just really a bid to just control my own destiny a bit and work with people I liked. And ever since then, that's what I've done, is I've surrounded myself with a great team of people I like and respect and enjoy their company. And that counts for so much, because now I'm the sort of master of my own destiny in all these sort of matters. And that's a great position to be in.
So the stakes of that last big swing were kind of complete, really. There was another 100% commitment decision, right? To walk away from a very famous public service broadcaster in the UK who were paying you literally to be the face of their channel. I understand you say it's an act of petulance, but you're far too clever for that, Lev. I think, you must have had a couple of sleepless nights about that kind of level of stakes, right?
I was more concerned about my mate's money than mine, because I knew that I could always just go and do more TV and I could earn it back. But my mates had literally put in their entire life savings into this because they were good friends. But they believed in me and I believed in them. And I thought, we are literally the A-team here. And these are the best people I know, with the biggest balls I know. And when you get a group of people together that back themselves completely, you just don't really make time for doubts. And so whilst there probably were a few sleepless nights and a few sort of like, no doubt there were second thoughts, I think we just pushed that to one side and we're like, you know what, worst comes to worst, we've had a bloody great time and we've given it our all, and we've put nobody can ever say that we didn't try. And I think that again is taking risks, taking measured, controlled risks, mitigating them where possible, but ultimately taking big, bold risks is at the heart of being a successful entrepreneur. And I think that counts for everything.
You took 3 amazing swings, really, that most other people wouldn't have had the guts or the vision to do, which is obviously why you've been so successful. And the first swing was leaving the army and launching Secret Compass. The second one's becoming a TV star, and to your point, becoming a brand and having to do all the hard work that becomes being the face of so many different organizations. And then the third one was moving away from established media to set up your own company. So looking back on those 3 big swings, which one do you think was the biggest decision for you? Which one was your real big swing?
I think probably, as I sit here now, it's probably the last one, actually, because I suppose the other 2 were really, I wouldn't say inevitable, nothing's inevitable, but they were consequential of that 10-year-old boy sitting there saying, I want to be an explorer. They were kind of like, I knew that I had to go through the phase of joining the army, leaving the army. I knew that I had to establish myself as a credible entity. So they were kind of like, they had to happen. The last bit didn't have to happen. I could have just sat in and been the face of a channel and done the same thing. But the last bit really has been the interesting bit, and the one that's fraught with dangers and challenges to this day, because I don't know where I'm going next. It's like, I feel as though I've sort of done all the stuff I wanted to do as a 10-year-old, but like now is the exciting bit. It's like, what keeps that interest going? What keeps the drive? What's the motivation? And actually that ownership comes with a lot of responsibility. I think that what makes it interesting is actually having creative diversity and kind of taking your ego out of it as well. And that's often the hardest thing with a lot of things is being able to look at things objectively. It's that old Kipling poem, If. It's like looking at triumph and disaster as both equal imposters. And actually, it doesn't matter if it's necessarily successful or failure, but as long as you learn a valuable lesson out of it, And that's what I'm trying to do now is have some creative diversity. You know, I'm having a go at different things. Whether or not I'm any good at them is by the by. I know it's easier to say that when you've had success, but you know, I'm writing fiction, I'm writing children's books, I'm working on a screenplay for a movie. You know, It might all be crap, but I'm having a go and I'm enjoying the process of doing these things and getting a lot out of it personally. And it keeps me entertained and it keeps me busy, and who knows where that might lead.
It sounds to me like you've just figured out how to keep recommitting to your own ideals and your own high standards, because at every stage of your journey, you seem to have had the strength and the fortitude to actually be brave enough to keep evolving and to keep finding that next thing that's going to stimulate you and allow you to express yourself. And if anything, from today, I've learned that we can all be crap at something when we start at it, but it's that probably persistence and bravery in your story that has got you to where you are today. Would you say that's fair?
Well, I can thank my granddad for that, I think, and listening to his stories as a 10-year-old, because I think it's those stories that we hear when we're younger of inspiration, and maybe David Shepherd too. And look, we all get our motivation and inspiration from different places, but actually I thank the people that inspired me and gave me those hard knock lessons early on, because they meant a lot, and they obviously stuck.
So it's been my absolute pleasure to have you on the Big Swing today to learn about those big decisions you made along the way.
Well, I want to say thank you to you, Sam, as well, because you were there, and 12 years ago when we made that video, I remember it well, because that was probably my earliest foray into being in front of the camera, and I felt very self-conscious and very awkward, but you sort of mentored me through that, so thank you.
No, it's my pleasure, Lev. I'm very proud to know that I played a very small role in your great success.
So that was my conversation with Levison Wood. His biggest swing was to leave Channel 4 and set up his own company and to self-fund his upcoming shows. That doesn't sound like much to somebody who's walked the entire length of the Nile and been into countless war zones and fought for his country. But to be honest, as a producer myself, that's a massive deal. Usually when you work with a broadcaster, you pitch them a show and they say, yeah, let's make it. And then they give you all the money to cover the costs of putting your show on air. Okay, so as a producer, you get all that income pretty much guaranteed, and you get to go off and make your show. And at the end, you get to keep some of the money. It's a brilliant business model. The risk is all really with the broadcaster generally. So to say, no, instead of taking the money from somebody, I'm going to go off and raise hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds to go and make the show first, and then go to broadcasters and hope somebody wants to buy it. Oh my God, what a big risk. And I suppose that just shows what an adventurous character Lev really is, not just physically as an explorer, but entrepreneurially as somebody who'll go out there and really back themselves 100% to succeed. And I just have so much respect for Lev for being brave enough to walk away and to do his own thing, despite the challenging stakes and the high stakes of doing that. And he's just such a superstar, isn't he? He's good looking, he's suave, he's become the character that he always wanted to be. If you see Lev walking down the street, he looks like an explorer. He's sponsored by all these amazing brands. He travels the world doing incredible things. You know, he is the epitome of success, really, when I look at him. And normally when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, there's a little bit of jealousy in there, not going to lie. But with Lev, there's none of that. Because quite simply, I could never do what he does. There's no way I'm getting on a plane to Afghanistan to go camping, or thinking about going on a caravanning trip to the Sudan. Forget it, mate. I'm quite happy doing what I do, and driving a desk is much more exciting to me than driving a camel. So, fair play to Levison. He's amazing and he does it. And for all of us entrepreneurs, we might not be going to climb mountains in crazy places, but the feelings are kind of relative. The feelings of taking on a big, scary adventure where you're not sure of what the outcome's going to be like is pretty similar, I think, to going out there to be the first person to hike across Madagascar. And if you do want to break through, like Levison did, as an entrepreneur, you have got to do something very different and very brave. And that's what Lev did when he walked the Nile. But it's also, when I look at other entrepreneurs I know, what all of them have to do if they really want to break into that industry and to change the paradigm. To create a paradigm shift, you have to be brave enough to leave it all on the dance floor and to try something that pretty much nobody else is willing to do. And I think Lev's passion and bravery in walking the Nile really speaks to something that exists in me as an entrepreneur, is that wish to be remembered, to do something of note and to take the rest of the world with you. And I'm so proud of him for what he's done. He's an amazing bloke, and go and watch his shows, go and see him on stage. He's a brilliant talker. Buy his books, you really won't regret it. And let's support Lev to go up to even greater heights. So thank you, Lev, for an amazing conversation. You've been listening to The Big Swing with me, Sam Barcroft. To support us, please rate and review the show. It really does help other people find the podcast. Or better yet, hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss the next episode. Next week, serial entrepreneur Benjamin Cohen, the founder of Pink News, which is the world's most read and watched LGBTQ online publication, takes us behind the scenes of his roller coaster ride to success. This episode is produced in association with Spirit Media. The sound designer was Will Horrocks, executive producer was Fred Casella, and it was created by me, Sam Barcroft. Before we go, I've got 2 final things for you. If you'd like to see extra content from our interviews, search for The Big Swing on social media to find exclusive behind-the-scenes videos. And if you'd like to become part of the Creativille community, where we support people building valuable organisations in the creator economy, head to creativille.co and subscribe to our newsletter for free. Thanks very much for listening to The Big Swing.